Monsieur Book, are the train crew locked in their quarters?
Yes, they are.
Then the stage is set for the final act. Ladies and gentlemen, I have gathered you together to hear my reconstruction of the murder of Samuel Edward Ratchet, also known as Cassetti. There is not one, but two possible solutions of the crime. I shall put them both before you, and I shall ask Monsieur Book and Dr. Constantine here to judge which solution is the correct one.
2 solutions?
Mr. Poirot, I am hardly qualified.
Nevertheless, your assistance is required. Now, you all know the facts of the case. Ratchet was found stabbed to death this morning. He was last known to be alive at 12:37 a.m. last night, when he spoke to the wagon-lit conductor through the door. His watch was found to be badly dented, and it had stopped at 1:15. Dr. Constantine, who examined the body, puts the time of death as having occurred between midnight and 2 in the morning. At half an hour after midnight, as you all know, the train ran into a snowdrift. After that time, it was impossible for anyone to leave the train. So, here is my first theory. The enemy, as Ratchet expected, joined the train at Vinkovsky by the door left open by Captain Arbuthnot and Monsieur McQueen, who had just descended to the platform. He was equipped with a wagon-lit jacket, which he wore over his ordinary clothes, and a pass key which enabled him to gain access to Ratchet's compartment in spite of the doors being locked. Ratchet was under the influence of a sleeping draught. This man stabbed him with great ferocity, 12 wounds in all. He left the compartment through the communicating door to Madame Hubbard's compartment.
Yes, that's so. Scared me half out of my wits.
The murderer thrust the dagger he had used into Mrs. Hubbard's handbag in passing. Without knowing it, he lost a button of his uniform. Then he slipped out of the compartment and along the corridor. He put the uniform jacket into Detective Locke's suitcase to cast suspicion on her. And a few minutes later, dressed in his ordinary clothes, he left the train just before it started off again, using the same means for egress, the door near the dining car. That is the first hypothesis. But there's a second. For that, we must examine the motive for the crime. Why was Ratchet killed? The motive is clear. Revenge, of course. Nothing was stolen. And we know that Ratchet had made many enemies. This was a premeditated crime, meticulously planned. Since the kidnapping and death of little Daisy Armstrong, which traumatized many people close to the family. Even when the police concluded that it was Suzanne Moreau, questions remained. Detective Locke continued her investigation, as did others. They became convinced the truth lay elsewhere. We now know who the real murderer of Daisy is. It is clear now that Daisy's killer was Ratchet, also known as Cassetti and Michael Clark and how many other names. But of course, many of you have known this for a long time. It is obvious that the 12 stab wounds are not a random number. Dr. Constantine's analysis revealed that some stab wounds appeared to have been caused by a right-handed attacker. Others indicated the knife wielder was left-handed. Some wounds were deep, more than one fatal. Yet Others were not much more than mere scratches. What can explain these discrepancies? This leads us to an obvious conclusion. They are symbolic. 12 stabs. 12! The same number as a trial jury in the United States. But not just a jury of 12 members condemning him to death, but 12 executioners as well. This self-appointed jury had meticulously planned for everything except
Snow.
snow. The avalanche that stopped us, as well as the presence of not one but two detectives on the train. They had to improvise, to hastily add clues and false leads. This woman in a red kimono does not exist. I don't know which of the passengers it was. It does not really matter. It was just a performance, a charade to introduce another possible culprit to muddy the waters. The time on Ratchet's broken watch was deliberately set to conceal the true time of the crime. The vial of vaping liquid incriminated Captain Arbuthnot. However, he had a solid alibi confirmed by Monsieur McQueen. Impossible then to suspect him. The conductor's jacket, found in Detective Locke's suitcase, was put there only to cast suspicion upon her. All these false leads were intended for me. But I am Poirot. I understood the truth. We have a train full of suspects. It's time to identify who the real culprits are. Let's start with Detective Locke. Planting the conductor's jacket in her suitcase was an attempt to implicate Detective Locke, but she couldn't fake her drugged condition. Dr. Constantine can testify that the drugged tea incapacitated her for hours, and she had 2 relapses. Let us move on to Monsieur McQueen. When I told him about Cassetti, he looked very surprised that I managed to make the connection between him and the Armstrong case. He told me, "But I thought we had..." I think he meant, "You thought you didn't leave any real clues linking the murder to the Armstrong kidnapping. Moreover, you insisted that Ratchet did not speak French when you knew I had heard a voice calling out in French that was supposed to be Ratchet." You took some pleasure in leaving me false clues, I think. It was quite annoying. But you told me yourself that your father was the district attorney who handled the Armstrong case.
The case haunted my father. At first, he believed Suzanne Moreau had helped her boyfriend, Noah, to kidnap Daisy, even though there were questions that went unanswered, and a young policewoman refused to let it go, continuing to find discrepancies, but never enough to reopen the official investigation.
That policewoman sits there. Her name is Joanna Locke.
Then tell him. Tell him how in the end my father believed you, how he resigned a job that he loved, racked with guilt that he may have let that monster go free. He died young, broken, his faith in justice broken. That's what Ratchet did to him.
Thank you for your honesty, Monsieur McQueen. Your father is one more victim of the man who called himself Ratchet. Now, I will turn to Ratchet's valet, Monsieur Masterman. Ratchet sensed danger close to him and naturally wanted to stay awake. You gave him sleeping pills without his knowledge. Once he was sound asleep, you could do what you had to do in peace.
Sir, I'll tell you the truth. I was Colonel Armstrong's adjutant in the war, sir, and afterwards, I was his valet in New York. I'm afraid I concealed the fact this morning. It was very wrong of me, sir, but I knew how suspicious it would look.
Is that all you have to say?
That's all, sir.
Now, to leave no suspicious stone unturned, let us move on to Monsieur Bouc.
What? Me? A suspicious stone?
Bouc, my friend, of course you are not guilty. You did everything you could to get me on this train. What madness would cause you to ensure, and I speak with all modesty, that the best detective in the world could be present to witness your crime?
But doesn't our friendship count as well?
Most assuredly, but a murderer can wear all sorts of masks, including friendship. Let us consider our ever-efficient wagon-lit conductor, Pierre Michel. Your admission that you drugged Detective Locke immediately incriminates you, but the murder could not have been possible without your very capable assistance. Your knowledge of train procedures made the murder possible, and your position in the corridor of the train allowed you to be the perfect alibi for several passengers. And your motive? Suzanne Moreau, Daisy Armstrong's poor nanny, who was wrongly accused and committed suicide, was your daughter.
C'est un foiré. He got what he deserved. My poor daughter has finally been avenged. My Suzanne. My child.
Let's move on now to Monsieur Hardman, one of 3 detectives on this train. Monsieur Hardman, I think you are a real detective, but you were never hired by Ratchet. Your alibi was that you were watching the corridor to protect Ratchet, which, of course, you never did. You protected Pierre Michel. However, we just saw that his alibi doesn't hold up, so neither does yours.
I don't know about the conductor.
Being Suzanne's fiancé, you had a substantial motive to punish Ratchet. You used your detective skills, just as Detective Locke did, to hunt him down and finally avenge the death of your beloved.
That's right, Mr. Poirot. I do have some detective skills.
I never doubted it. Now, Fraulein Schmidt, the lady's maid with the soul of a cook. Fraulein Schmidt, you told me of your remorse for drugging Detective Locke. I believe you are sincere. However, as the cook of the Armstrong family, you experienced the drama from within. The death of Daisy, then Sonia Armstrong, who died in childbirth, and finally Suzanne and John Armstrong.
So much misfortune in that poor family. The death of this criminal is only justice.
Let us move on to Countess Andreny. I was impressed by the earnestness of her husband when he swore to me solemnly on his honor that his wife never left her compartment that night. Should I believe it? Countess Andreny, being Sonia Armstrong's sister, you had every reason in the world to want to avenge her. But you were incapable of stabbing someone, even after what he had done to you and your family. The night of the crime, you simply took a sleeping pill. I appreciate the irony that nearby, Detective Locke was also in a drugged sleep. When you awoke, You thought the nightmare was over.
Rudolph?
Hush, my love. Hush.
Excellent transition. I was coming to you, Count Andreny. "12 people, a jury. This was very important to all of you. If Countess Andreny did not stab Ratchet, someone had to take her place. And you, Count, the beloved husband. I've seen how fiercely you love and protect your wife.
Enough! I would do anything for Helena. Anything. Even that.
Yes, even that. Let's move on to Monsieur Foscarelli. Detective Locke found out that you were the Armstrong chauffeur, and that you planned to travel on the same train at the same time as Ratchet. That is what made her decide to obtain a ticket as well. Unfortunately, she could not prevent the murder. Have you lost your tongue, Mr. Foscarelli?
Oh, Daisy. She was the delight of the house. Tonio, she called me. And she would sit in the car and pretend to drive me.
And you, Mademoiselle Olson, a champion for the immigrants, a worthy calling. Mademoiselle Olson, you supported Madame Hubbard's story about her connecting door latch, a story that I later demonstrated to be impossible. So, you deliberately lied to me, and you also lied about Mademoiselle Debenham's whereabouts.
Enough! I can't take this anymore! I know what you want from me, Mr. Poirot. Very well. Here it is. She was my little Daisy, my angel, so patient. When I patched a scrape or took her temperature, that was my job. But she was so much more to me. She was a shining light in an ever-darkening world. I've tried to honor her by caring for children who have lost everything.
Thank you, Mademoiselle Olson. You too shed light on your part in this mystery. You were Daisy Armstrong's nurse. I will ask you no more questions. It is enough that you have admitted what I know to be the truth, and I understand. Let's move on. Dr. Constantine.
You suspect me? I know none of these people. I didn't know Ratchet either, and I've taken a solemn oath to help people, not murder them.
You are one of the few people in this room not to have any connection with the Armstrong case. Moreover, your alibi is confirmed by Monsieur Bouc, whom I would trust with my life.
That is very kindly said, my friend.
We now come to Mademoiselle Debenham and Captain Arbuthnot, whose relationship was not in doubt from the moment I inspected your room at the hotel.
You have a bloody nerve.
Indeed, I do.
We're getting married.
Congratulations. But I would rather talk about your relationship to John Armstrong. Et voilà. Captain Arbuthnot, you served in the army with John Armstrong. What I don't understand is why a man your age is still a captain. One might expect you to be a colonel as well.
Ever fought in a war, Poirot?
It was war that first brought me to England.
Then you know what it's like. There's a shattering sound, and death, and mistakes, acting on intelligence that proved to be wrong. I sent a patrol to their death. Good men, brave men, wasted. John testified on my behalf at a court-martial. I'm not a colonel. I don't deserve to be, you bloody fool. But I'm also not in prison. John remained my best friend until... There, you have my story. Understand now?
Archie, calm down, please.
You're right, Mary. What you see in me, I don't understand.
Oh, Archie, I see in you what John saw.
Miss Debenham, I'm sorry.
My turn, is it?
I'm afraid so. And you have caused me quite a puzzlement. Your connection with the Armstrong family was not obvious. Then I remembered the job you currently hold. That's the right answer. You were the teacher of... Helena Andrény, whose maiden name was Helena Goldenberg before she married Count Andrény.
Yes, absolutely. Why lie to you? She was an excellent student.
Captain Arbuthnot. You had one of the strongest alibis, thanks to Mr. McQueen. But his testimony melted like a snowflake. There went your alibi. Poof! Unless you have another one. As for you, Mademoiselle Debenham, Mademoiselle Olsen was the only one who could confirm your alibi. I think you know where you stand.
Very good, Mr. Poirot. Are you satisfied?
I will be soon. Now I must turn to Sonia Armstrong's godmother, Princess Dragomirov. Princess Dragomirov, you weren't on my list of suspects at the start, given your social position.
I left my social position in a cold country.
Do you object to being addressed as Princess?
I deny people the opportunity. It makes a good story to tell their friends. It also guarantees a good table in the best restaurants.
Princess, there is also, forgive me, your extreme physical fragility.
It does not stop me when I must be strong.
Indeed. Of more importance, though, is the fact that you're the only left-handed person on the train. And the single blow to Ratchet from a left-handed person was very, forgive me, weak. Finally, I'm afraid I know the alibi that you shared with Fraulein Schmidt is false.
You have been very thorough, sir. I hope you will permit me to say we are much alike.
I am honored. Now it is time to end with Mrs. Hubbard, or should I say, Linda Arden. If Princess Dragomirov hadn't told me about her relationship with this famous actress, I might not have made the connection. But you are a great actress, madame. Your performance as a flighty, self-involved woman was superb. I never would have guessed something entirely different. As for what ties you to the Armstrong family, it is obvious. My little grey cells did not let me down. Mrs. Hubbard, you are the mother of Sonia Armstrong and Mrs. Andrény. Madame Hubbard, you really are a remarkable actress. You put so much effort into your character and into staging the murder. I saw it as a perfect mosaic, each person playing his or her allotted part, so carefully arranged that if suspicion should fall on any one person, the evidence of one or more of the others would clear the accused person and confuse the issue. Everything was meticulously planned. But you hadn't expected that Detective Locke and I would be on this train, and the avalanche would block it on the night of the murder. You had to improvise. But again, improvisation would be another of your skills as an actress. So you came up with the story that the latch on the door that communicated with Ratchet's compartment was hidden by the handbag.
I always fancied myself in comedy parts. That slip about the sponge bag was silly. Shows you should always rehearse properly. You know all about it, Mr. Poirot. You're a very wonderful man, but even you can't quite imagine what it was like. That awful day. I was just crazy with grief. So were the servants. We decided then and there that the sentence of death that Ratchet had escaped had got to be carried out. There were 12 of us, or rather 11. Suzanne's father was over in France, of course. First, we thought we'd draw lots as to who should do it, but in the end we decided on this way. It was the driver, Antonio, who suggested it. Mary worked out all the details later with Hector McQueen. It took a long time to perfect our plan. We first had to track Ratchet down. Hardman managed that in the end. Then we had to try and get Edward and Hector into his employment. Well, we managed that. Then we had a consultation with Suzanne's father. Captain Arbuthnot was very keen on having 12 of us. He seemed to think it made it more orderly. He didn't like the stabbing idea much, but he agreed that it did solve most of our difficulties. Well, Suzanne's father was willing. Suzanne had been his only child. We knew from Hector that Ratchet would be coming back from the east, sooner or later, by the Orient Express. With Pierre Michel actually working on that train, the chance was too good to be missed. My daughter's husband had to know, of course, and he insisted on coming on the train with her. Hector wrangled it so that Ratchet selected the right day for traveling when Michel would be on duty. And then, at the last minute, you came. For the rest of the story, you worked out everything, Mr. Poirot. You were right about all of us. What are you going to do about it? If it must all come out, can't you lay the blame upon me, and me only? I would have stabbed that man 12 times willingly. It wasn't only that he was responsible for my daughter's death, and her child's, and that of the other child who might have been alive and happy now. It was more than that. There had been other children kidnapped before Daisy, and there might be others in the future. Society had condemned him. We were only carrying out the sentence, but it's unnecessary to bring all these others into it, all these good, faithful souls.
You are a director of the company, Monsieur Bouc. What do you say?
In my opinion, Poirot, the first theory you put forward was the correct one. Decidedly so. I suggest that is the solution we offer to the police. You agree, Doctor?
Certainly, I agree. As regards the medical evidence, I think that I made one or two fantastic suggestions.
Then, having placed my solution before you, I have the honor to retire from the case.
I'm sorry to wake you up in the middle of the night, Poirot, but it couldn't wait. There was a detail that bothered me in my preliminary autopsy of Ratchet's body. I went back to examine the body and I discovered a wound covered by another. The blow I hadn't seen was delivered by a thinner, sharper blade. So there were not 12, but 13 stab wounds.
12 stabs for 12 jurors. It doesn't work with 13 wounds. The symmetry is destroyed.
It can't be one of the culprits who stabbed him twice?
Doctor, a different knife was used. There is only one explanation. Somehow, some way, there is a 13th murderer on this train.
We must tell Book. The case is not solved.